Welcome to the California Garden in the month of May. In today's episode, we look at all the harvests we made this month. We will take a tour of the California Garden. We have some things for you to do. All this and a lot more in today's episode of California Gardening. So let's begin with all the harvests we made this month. Starting with cabbage. We were growing cabbage in our containers as well as in the raised beds. But you can see here the first few harvests are from the containers. You can see a beautiful looking head of cabbage. And it's very easy to grow cabbage in containers. Even if you have smaller containers, you might get smaller heads. But you can see that it's so easy to grow cabbage even in these concrete mixing boxes as you see here. These are very cheaply available at your home improvement stores. And we planted 2 cabbages. And since the container doesn't have a lot of soil, the heads don't get too large, but these are still very delicious, very nice cabbages. This is the early golden acre variety. And the harvest looks beautiful. Moving on to cauliflower. Although a cool season crop, cauliflower can be grown year-round in Southern California. So the first one that we harvested here looks a little not so purple, but if you look at all the other cauliflowers that we harvested, this is the purple variety. They look absolutely amazing. The deep purple color indicates a lot of anthocyanins, antioxidants. They taste absolutely delicious. Green onions or bunching onions. We planted a lot of these bunching onions in our raised bed, and while we used a lot of the greens as we needed them, it was time to harvest the onions itself, the whole bulb. Now remember that green bunching onions don't form large bulbs like the regular onions do, but they are eaten for their slender stems and their leaves. And while we have eaten a lot of these leaves, the actual nutrition, the stem of this plant is very nutrient dense. So you can see it's a little bit of a hassle to actually harvest and remove all the roots from the plant. It's actually quite laborious. It took me quite a while to just uproot the plant, remove all the roots, and then once you have the individual onion stems, you can just cut off the roots as you see here. And then you can eat them raw. I prefer to eat them raw. They're absolutely delicious. Now one of the problems that I ran into was that these onions grew for a very long time, so they also started bolting. And once the onions start bolting, the stems don't taste that good. So although you can still eat them, they taste very much like onions. You're better off harvesting them early before they start producing flowers. And we're going to go ahead and remove all these onion stems. You can see there are a lot of onion stems here. And you need a lot of patience to cut off all the roots and make sure that the stems are clean before you wash them. And you can look at a harvest here. Once it's nicely washed, they look beautiful and they're very delicious. Moving on to chickpeas or black gram, or a lot of names for this plant. But essentially these are grown from the seeds of the black gram or the chickpeas or the garbanzo beans. And these plants produce these edible pods that are extremely delicious. I loved eating these seeds from the pods. They are basically green in color and extremely delicious. And there are a few ways to harvest this plant. One is you harvest the tops and then remove the pods as you see here. Or you can just harvest the whole plant once they're done producing. So in our raised bed, we had a lot of plants that were done producing. We did harvest the pods, a few pods, now and then. I mostly ate the pods fresh off of the plant. But now that the pods have developed, it's time to remove the plants. Now some of my friends have suggested that the leaves of this plant are also edible when the plant is young. If you have tried eating the leaves of this plant, do put in a comment below and let me know. It would be very useful to know how the leaf tastes like for this plant. But I've eaten the green chickpeas, the ones that you see here from the pods. You can eat them raw, you can roast them. They taste absolutely delicious. Lemons. We had our Meyer lemon tree growing in the ground, and it keeps producing lemons every now and then. So this month it did produce a few lemons. And as you see here, the Meyer lemons are quite large in size. They are not as tart as some of the other lemons like Eureka lemon or the Bear's lime. So compared to a lot of other citrus plants, this is not very tart, but it makes great lemonades. You can use it for cooking. It has a lot of good uses. Hyacinth beans. Our hyacinth bean plant had become a monster plant, and although I put in a 7-foot trellis for this plant, it way overgrew this trellis just by using the 10-foot EMT conduits on the side. And you can see how large the plant has become. And it had also started producing a lot of hyacinth beans. So you can either harvest the hyacinth beans whole, or you can just harvest individual pods like you see here. Now if your hyacinth bean plant has a lot of flowers, then you can just harvest the individual pods like you see here. However, if your hyacinth bean plant has completely produced the cluster of beans like you see here, you can then harvest the whole bunch. And the reason for that is the flowers that are still there will produce more beans. And we were getting a lot of hyacinth beans from just these few plants that were growing in the ground. And they have been growing for about 2 years now. So this is a perennial plant. It will slow down in the winters and then come back up in spring and summer and give you a huge harvest. Now remember that hyacinth beans must be cooked, just like some other vegetables like kidney beans that must always be cooked before eating. Hyacinth beans must be cooked before eating. It removes some of the chemicals or components in hyacinth bean that are not good for you. So once you cook it, it's perfectly fine to consume them. And just look at our harvest here. This is a huge harvest of hyacinth beans. These are very nice, fresh and delicious. Peppers. We started harvesting our peppers from our overwintered pepper plant. We had the Cajun bell pepper. As you see here, the Cajun bell pepper is one of the tastiest peppers I've eaten. Really nice spice to it. And we also had the sweet banana peppers. Another one of my favorites to grill or just roast and eat. And this is a harvest. Not a lot of peppers yet, but this was from our overwintered peppers only. Pigeon peas. We had a lot of pigeon pea plants growing, but I think the biggest one is in the ground, as you see here. And it looks almost like an ornamental plant, beautiful plant with beautiful flowers. And we are harvesting the pigeon peas now. Now, pigeon peas are same as tur dal or lentils that you get in the grocery store. But the ones that you get at the grocery store are highly processed. They basically dry the lentils and then split them, polish them, and then it comes to you. So what you're looking at here is the source of lentils, which is pigeon peas. And this ranks very high in nutrition value. There are some other beans that are even better, like soybeans, but lentils are also very delicious to eat. So what we're harvesting here are the fresh pods. So you can either harvest them fresh. You still have to cook it before eating, although you can eat them raw. It's not that delicious when eaten raw. You can then harvest the pods that are dry. And the dry pods will make this kind of a sound when you shake them. And that's when you know these are the dry pods ready to be stored and consumed. These are the fresh pods. And these are the dried pods. And we're going to be shelling them to show you how they look like. They look very similar to soybeans, a little smaller maybe when they're fresh. And they do shrink in size a little bit once they dry up. Some of the immature peas are green in color. Some of them are yellow. And this is how the fresh pigeon pea looks like. Something very different, something not a lot of you might have seen. But this is eventually what makes lentils. Well, let's get closer to lentils though with the dried version. These are the dried pods. And we're going to be shelling them to show you how the seeds look like. And this is how whole lentils look like. Whole pigeon peas, whole tur dal. And you can see here whole peas, whole lentils, which are then split and then polished and then finally sent out to the grocery stores for distribution. Potatoes. We were growing several varieties of potatoes in our raised beds, and you can see here this is the Yukon Gold potato, one of my favorite varieties to eat. Not one of the easiest ones to grow though, but this time we had a decent sized potato plant, so I'm hoping we'll get a decent sized potato harvest as well. So as we begin harvesting, you can see that the potatoes are quite well formed. There are at least 4 or 5 potatoes per plant, which is what you should aim for at least when you're growing potatoes. Now the time to grow potatoes in Southern California is around January. That's when you start planting the potato seeds. They like to grow through winter and the spring season. And once the spring season starts, they will start sending out shoots and start growing. And they will usually produce by summer, before summer arrives. And potatoes love it when the weather is cooler, but not freezing. They don't like weather that's like really hot like the summer weather, although they will grow in the summer season too. And you can see here we're just harvesting and keeping the potatoes separately so that we can harvest a few more on the other side. And more potatoes from the plants on the other side. You can see here beautiful looking large potatoes. Now note that our soil contains a lot of earthworm castings, a lot of compost. It's just a very rich mix of soil, and potatoes love this kind of soil. They like soil with a lot of loose organic matter like compost and worm castings, and they'll grow really well in such soil. And you can look at a harvest here. All these potatoes, they look amazing, and these were just from a few plants that we planted. Now you can store these potatoes just like that and they'll stay for a few days, and then you can keep it in your pantry for using it over the course of a few weeks. Now moving on to our red potatoes harvest. We were growing red potatoes on the other side of the same raised bed. And you can see once again decently sized potatoes. And in general, I've found the red potatoes to be much easier to grow compared to the white potatoes, or the Yukon Gold potatoes at least. You can see here some of these potatoes have a green color, which should be avoided. They got exposed to the sun. And you can see here lots of large potatoes being harvested. Now once again, I do suggest that you eat multiple potato varieties, both with the white skin as well as with the red skin. They have a lot of vitamins and minerals that are good for you. And you can see now we are harvesting the potatoes from some of the other plants. And I'll let you just watch the harvest and enjoy watching all these potatoes being harvested from this raised bed. And just look at our red potato harvest here. Nice looking potatoes. Some of these are medium sized, some of them are large, but really beautiful looking potatoes. Tomatoes. We have our tomatoes growing from December. This is the Bush Roma, although we narrowed it down to just one plant now that's growing really well, and that's the Bush Roma that you see here. We also have our single stem tomatoes. You can see there are a couple of varieties. This is a heirloom Indian variety of tomato, and growing single stem tomatoes has been really a good adventure this year. I'm really pleased with the way the tomatoes have grown on a single stem, and I think I'll continue to grow tomatoes this way in the future. But you can see here beautiful looking tomatoes, and these are the single stem tomatoes on our raised bed. And these are also looking beautiful, nice tomatoes. You can see our harvest here, beautiful looking tomatoes. And now let's begin with a tour of our garden, starting with the raised beds. In our first raised bed, we have our onions growing. They're still growing. It's been quite a while, but hopefully they'll start producing bulbs soon. Followed by some new seeds we sowed. We sowed some okra seeds. We also sowed some bush beans on this first bed. We have some beans growing, asparagus beans as well as pole beans on this trellis. And some more pole beans on the other side, as you can see here. And all these pole beans will be growing on the trellis between the first two raised beds. And on the other side, you can see more pole beans growing from the other direction. We have some cucumbers. The cucumbers are also growing along the trellis on this side. And we have some eggplants. These are the small Indian eggplants. You can see some of the eggplants that are being formed. Now you can harvest them when they're small, or you can let them grow larger. We have some peppers in between. These are the green peppers. And you can see the plants are tiny, but the peppers are huge. They all have one pepper each. So if you're watching this video, let me know why you think the pepper plants are stunted in growth. Do you think there's something we could do to make them stronger? Let me know in the comments below. And we have some more eggplants. This is the medium Indian eggplant, a new variety that I'm growing for this year. And on the next raised bed, we have okras. We have the red burgundy okra that we planted, followed by a couple more okra varieties. This huge cauliflower plant that's still producing a cauliflower. We're waiting to harvest that one. And then we sowed some beet seeds here. We love eating beets, so we are growing more beets this season. And we have more eggplants here, as you can see. Beautiful looking seedlings, but they still have to grow stronger. So this turmeric just popped up from nowhere. And we also have these peppers. These are the cayenne peppers that we overwintered. And they seem to be growing okay. We have some gourds growing on this side of the trellis. These are ridge gourd plants. We're growing several ridge gourd plants on this trellis. We have this pollinator, salvia. And then we have some more gourds, the same ridge gourd plants that are growing on the other side. And then we have our kale jungle. Our kale is just grown enormously big. We keep harvesting the kale, but we can't keep up with how much kale this plant is giving us. A lot of brassicas on this bed, cauliflower, cabbages, followed by some peppers. A lot of pepper varieties here. The poblano peppers have started producing now. And on the final raised bed, we have amaranth. We planted some amaranth plants. Some cilantro on the side. And cucumbers. This is the beet alpha variety of cucumber, which will grow on this large trellis that is here. I'm really looking forward to trying this variety this year. I've never grown this before. Followed by a space where we just sowed some corn seeds, and you can see some of them are popping up now. And our single stem tomato area, just look at how beautiful these tomatoes are. I'm really impressed with the way the single stem tomatoes have grown. This actually turned out to be a determinate tomato variety, but all the other tomatoes, they are huge. Looking quite good. In fact, they've grown almost to 6 feet, which is the size of this trellis, the stick. So I'm not sure how I'm going to manage these plants going forward, but we'll see. We then have ivy gourd on the back. These are the ivy gourd plants from last year. They are a perennial plant and they're growing really fast now. And we will get ivy gourds within a month or so. And that completes the tour of our raised bed garden. Let's now move on to the containers. In our first container, we have the longevity spinach that's growing well, followed by hyacinth beans. This is a new variety I'm trying this year. We'll see how that goes. Growing on this really large trellis. Followed by our ivy gourd plant. This is a different one that we are growing on the raised bed, nicer variety. We have some early long eggplants here, 2 plants in 1 whiskey barrel, and they seem to be doing good. We then have our bottle gourd plant. This is the round bottle gourd plant. Once again, first time I'm growing this variety, and I'm really excited to see how this turns out. We then have our gooseberry plant, and it has grown quite well compared to the previous month. In the next container, we have our jumbo orange tree, which is totally hidden by all these cantaloupes that are growing around the side. They look pretty promising now. We have some Nombo giant okra in the next container, followed by a hyacinth bean plant, which is another different variety of hyacinth bean that I'm trying this year. In the next container, we have our Egyptian walking onions. This is a very interesting onion variety. Followed by our single stem tomato again. This is a beefsteak type tomato, and I've protected this plant with a cover so that the critters don't get in and get to these huge tomatoes. And these are extremely useful for containers. I'll post a link to this product in the video description and the pinned comments below so you can check it out. In the next container, we have our snake gourd plant, which has now grown quite well. Quite dramatic growth in the last month. Followed by our taro root plant, which has also grown quite big now, looking quite nice. Then we have our cabbage plants. The cabbage plants are doing okay. Followed by more onions. We have grown these onions from sets again, but they are forming bulbs now. We have ivy gourd in the next container. I know we have a lot of ivy gourd plants. They're all looking quite beautiful. We have our mint plant, and we started using a lot of mint this season, so it's all looking very good. Followed by our turmeric plant, which has now grown quite well. We have some more tomatoes. These tomato plants are not growing that well. This is the same Indian heirloom tomato variety that we have in our other containers and the raised bed. Followed by some Nombo giant okra plants that seem to be doing okay now. They have started producing some okra already, as you can see here. We have some cilantro on the side of this pot and some chilies on this massive chili plant that you see here. In the next container, we have hyacinth beans. These are the bush type hyacinth beans. We are saving these for seeds. And we have some cauliflowers in the next container. Now the cauliflowers have bolted due to the changes in the weather here in Southern California. These are not looking too good. In the next container, we have some beets that are growing quite well. And the main plant here is the bitter melon or the bitter gourd plant that has now grown to a decent size. In the next container, we have more snake gourd plants. Looking quite good now. And in the first container, we have 2 eggplant varieties. This is a new eggplant variety that we are trying out for the first time this year. In our green stalk leaf planter, we planted some cilantro and some strawberries. And as you can see here, some of the strawberry plants died for some unknown reason. I have no idea why. But I may be replacing them, or I may just leave it and let the other plants grow. We'll see how that goes. But a lot of cilantro, a lot of strawberries in this green stalk leaf planter. And I'm really happy to see how they grow. In the Green Stalk Classic planter, we have a lot of onions. You can see we planted 30 onions, large bulb onions, and they'll hopefully form bulbs very soon. They're looking quite good. They just have to develop their bulbs. So overall, the green stalk planters are a great choice if you want to save space and grow vertically. You can see them side by side. The leaf planter is on the left, the classic planter is on the right. And this is a great way to expand your garden to grow vertically and grow more in the same space. Now I do have other containers on the side. In the first one we have some galangal that's growing, followed by this chili plant that's now growing quite well. We have okras growing in the next container, followed by eggplants. Now this is a overwintered eggplant, still growing well, followed by a single stem tomato plant. And we have our mint. Look at the mint here, it looks pretty amazing. There's another chili plant here, followed by holy basil, which we are growing in this container. The turmeric tubers have been planted here, they have not grown yet. And then we have this purple potato plant that's growing in this container. And that concludes the tour of our container garden. And now let's look at some things for you to do in your garden this month. After you've harvested all your spring vegetables and plants, it's time to add some nutrients to the soil. Now I add worm castings. I get mine from Vermistera. They're very high quality worm castings. I usually will layer worm castings first on the soil, one layer of worm castings as you see here. Now worm castings contain humic acid that becomes humus in the soil, and it helps plants uptake all their nutrients very easily. It has tremendous benefits for the plant, so I highly recommend that you do use worm castings in your gardening. It's also organic and very easy to use. Once you spread out all the worm castings on the raised bed, all you need to do is just water thoroughly. Make sure that the worm castings are settled into the soil. So that's our first step of adding nutrients to the soil, is adding those worm castings. And then I add a good quality potting mix. We get a good quality organic potting mix at our local Costco that I usually purchase. This potting mix also helps retain moisture. And I would avoid getting the raised bed mix by the same company. They sell the same product at Costco, and that's not a good product. I highly recommend that you get the potting mix. It's called the Organic Choice Moisture Control Potting Mix. So you just spread the potting mix on the raised bed just like you see here. And once you've done that, you just water your raised bed and you're good to start planting now. You can also save a lot of money by composting your leaves and all your garden waste in your own composter. We use a tumbling composter. I have reviewed this composter many times in my videos, and I'll provide some links to the composter review as well. We ordered our composter from Costco, and all you really do is put in the leaves, the dried leaves, your kitchen scraps, everything inside this compost bin, and within just a few weeks you will get compost that looks like this. And we are adding this compost to our raised bed, and you can see all the scraps, the eggshells, everything that you see here are excellent for the compost bin. And we're just spreading it out on the raised bed. And I also like to then add a layer of peat moss. Now because compost, peat moss have very different physical properties, compost adding all the nutrients in the soil, peat moss playing a role in moisture retention as well. Compost also retains a lot of moisture, by the way, but just adding this layer of peat moss makes it very easy to sow seeds. Like you saw in the garden tour, we sowed some seeds here. So it makes it a lot easier once you have the peat moss as one layer. Now the other thing is fertilizing your plants. I had reviewed these AgroThrive fertilizers, pre-digested organic fertilizers in one of my previous videos. And all you do is really mix it in with water. And the benefit of using this kind of a fertilizer like AgroThrive is that they are pre-digested, which means they are readily available to the plants. And you can get some free samples by going to their website. I'll provide a link to their website in the description below. And remember, this is not a sponsored video. None of these companies have sponsored this video. I've been using these products for a very long time and they do really work very well in my garden. And all you do is with the AgroThrive fertilizers, you mix it into the water and then water the plants like you see here. I do a foliar drench and then also water the base of the plant. And this has served quite well for me in my garden. You can also use this kind of water-soluble organic fertilizer in containers. And a lot of people who are struggling with growing plants don't feed their plants well enough. Your plants need nutrition. They need the nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium that's there in these fertilizers to grow into nice big plants. So make sure that you add fertilizer to your plants every 15 days or so. Another nutrient that I add for my plants every 15 days is worm tea. Now here you can see the gallon of worm tea that I have here is from Vermistera. They make excellent worm tea at a very excellent cost. And you just dilute it and water your plants with that, and it really helps your plants thrive. There's also a product called Vitality, which is basically a very high quality form of worm tea, concentrated worm tea. So you use less of it, but it has a very dramatic effect on your plants. And this has a dramatic effect on some plants, especially seedlings, and I've seen some really good results using Vitality on my seedlings this year. Now, if you want to buy worm castings or worm tea, you can use coupon code CAG. You not only get 10% off your order, you also get free shipping now. So that's a really good added benefit. I highly encourage you all to make use of this benefit while it lasts to grow some really good quality vegetables in your home garden. So there we have it, folks. That was our episode on the California garden for the month of May. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments box below. We'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.